I basically study agriculture by BS and MS in agriculture, PhD from Edinburgh University, and Fulbright postdoc in transgenic biotechnology from California. So I was a little bit, I have some comments that, as Ibrahim said, that like international policies also affect the food security. For example, Pakistan import palm oil from Malaysia, and it's our second highest import bill. The European countries gave incentives to the oil company that they can use biofuel, that they will have some incentives. So what the companies did, they import the palm oil and they convert it to biodiesel, and the palm oil prices goes doubles. So similarly, the corn is also being used to produce ethanol and food. But food security, when we say that food security is not coming from higher to lower, it goes from lower to higher. So it's a family food security, then community, village, province, country, and then international. So being these few areas, for example, if we talk about Africa, Africa has less food security as compared to other countries because Africa has missed the Green Revolution. Unfortunately, the Green Revolution was focused on grain crops, wheat, rice, corn, that's it. The African countries, people, their eating habits was banana, yam, and cassava. These were remains out of the Green Revolution. But now as GMOs, the gene revolution is addressing this problem because it's not the question of small farming or large farming, it's a question of efficient farming. If you are producing higher yield, you are getting higher yield by low input, then you are producing more. For example, in Pakistan, we have 96% small land holding, and we are exporting rice, wheat, and other food security. We are producing, and we have very large population, 170 millions. But we are feeding them, and we are even exporting them. These technologies are already proven. I mean, there is no rocket science. The only thing is, I mean, you have to apply it efficiently. If you have these and you can apply this, you can produce, so make the security. This biodiversity and other things, and this came later on. If a person is hungry, he will destroy a whole ecosystem. So if it has a food security, then he will think about biodiversity, ecosystem, and things like that. Thank you.
Okay. Any responses?
First of all, yes, I agree that it's important to the food security. The local food security is the first base when we talk about food security. Right? I agree with that, and also it's important to mention when we talk about trade. Globally, only 20% of everything produced is actually traded internationally. Most are actually traded locally, regionally, and that's really important because that's the basis of building a food secure system. Now that's, if you look on average, there are of course certain crops that are more traded internationally, such as cocoa or coffee, for instance, which is probably the reversed percentage. I think what is important when you mentioned one of the technologies is that this has to go along with what we talked about before, a lot of knowledge transfer and extension work. The technology alone will not change anything. It has to come with the appropriate training and understanding of how to apply a new technology. As a matter of fact, if that is not part of it, you won't see the expected results. So it's just important to say that whatever new technology that is taken into a market, it's a new uptake, it has to come along with a lot of knowledge transfer, and that the person who applies the new technology also know what to expect and what is part of the package that is bought when you buy a new technology. So I just want to have that mentioned.
Good.
Yeah, and just touching on your comment on efficiency, I know that's been a major theme among the groups that I've worked with. And one of the things that group has tried to put focus on is how do you measure and communicate indicators relative to efficiency goals. So, food relative to what resource? How much does it take to produce a bushel of corn, for example, or whatever crop of interest relative to land use, energy use? There, I think, are other calls out there for also having indicators relative to calories. But the point is that we need to normalize our understanding of food production against measures that make sense and that speak to the overall objectives of those dual challenges of both food production and resource conservation. And if we can speak in that language and have those common units, then I think it makes it easier to then talk about the question that you asked of what are the right technologies to get you there. But absent speaking with that kind of common language, it's harder to get at the right ways to meet those goals.
We're often presented with false choices when you don't have that context. We'll go here and then here. Oh, sorry,
Can I
AJ,
just
go
say
ahead.
one point on the biofuel thing, because I think it's an important one that's been raised, and
Yeah.
to recognize that in the room, that the whole biofuels agenda has changed the food agenda to some extent, and to me, it's a trend actually that we're going to see more of, that other sectors are going to start relying on the biophysical or the biophysical products or biological products. So plastics are now being manufactured out of biomass, and their whole industry is evolving. They're actually putting a heavier dependence on biological products that we're producing. And so I think that's something that's going to expand rather than contract in the years to come. And so dealing with that face on in terms of what Ibrahim said really about what are our production and consumption systems, and what do we need to have in our consumption systems, and what shouldn't be part of our consumption systems, because I think what's happened is our consumption systems have gone out of control. I think quite to the contrary, the overweight populations in many parts of the world are something that we need to get a handle on. The overconsumption of resources from a small portion of the world is something that's got to be part of the whole solution for this challenge.
And that alludes to the fact that there may actually someday be competition for the waste streams that Ibrahim listed could be used for food. So,
I thank you very much. My name is Bonadia Mamadou from Burkina Faso. I'm working with the Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development. I would like to agree with most of the presenters, and I would like to congratulate them for their presentations, which were very informative and very useful for us. And right now, my colleague from Pakistan raised a very good point. I think the efficiency of the way we make production is very, very key and constitutes one of the solutions for food security. And as the representative from UNEP has said, it's not only agriculture which contributes to food security. The non-woody products also contribute. Accessibility of water. So we have at least 4 sectors that contribute to food security. So I think there is a matter of making a link between all these sectors in order to promote food security. One key issue has been raised, and at 50% agree with one of the panelists, is this issue of technology. 2 weeks ago, we were negotiating in Bangkok on how to deal with the second commitment period as far as climate change is concerned. And one specific issue is the intellectual property right. So this is when we discuss on the transfer of technology from the north to the south. I totally agree with that between South-South, really there is a need to cooperate and to see how we can take benefit from that. And I know that in the Sahelian area in West Africa, we have some local technologies, best practices that are now disseminated and help the smallholders to improve the productivity. So on that, really, I think there is a need to make a differentiation between, the South-South and North-South cooperation as far as this issue of intellectual property right is concerned. I have participated in the negotiation of the convention until now, and since the beginning, the articles of the convention that are dealing with technology and the transfer of technology, we are facing the same problem. So it was the same statements from 1991 until now, and we haven't moved forward as far as the issue of technology is concerned. And one issue is not was not raised here, and I think one response from Chow addressed this issue is the good governance in our countries. I will just take 2 examples. Less than 7% of the national budget is allocated to agriculture. And we are talking about food security. It's a problem. In Burkina Faso, we have 3 to 4 regions out of 13 that annually are excellent of food. And there is no policy, no strategy to see how we can, spread or disseminate the rest in the other regions. So these 2 examples explain a matter or a problem of governance, or how we can identify the priority areas or objectives in order to promote food security. These are my contribution and what I would like to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any responses from the panel? Ibrahim?
I think these are very good contributions rather than questions, but let me just comment, give 2 comments. One is on this whole issue on agriculture and biodiversity. I don't think it would be helpful to see them as if they were mutually exclusive. Biodiversity provides food as much as it is important to also recognize that you can promote biodiversity in farms and have a sort of good integration of the 2 systems. It will not be, I think the world has learned lessons from the past, especially from developed countries, that it will not be very helpful to deplete your environment with the ambition of producing food and then realize that you have nothing left from your natural capital before you reinvest again to try to restore it, which is what happened in Europe, with the common agricultural policy, which tried to restore some lands that were initially occupied by agriculture. And it's very difficult to restore ecosystems, as we know. It is also important to recognize that talking about smallholders, of course it's a smaller matter of scale, but I have seen many places in Africa where people make their living and live correctly. I have not seen any malnourished child in these places that I'm talking about, where I spent many days in the villages. Simply, where do they get their food from? From nature. Essentially, they have the proteins from nature. They go to fish. They go to hunt, small hunting practices. They have non-timber forest products. They have foods. They have very small farms to really produce the minimum they need for their security, and they live well. So it's a matter of scale. So in these places, I think it is important to maintain that kind of balanced way of life. And what we have observed is governments and NGOs and international organizations, with the best of intentions of the world, trying to come and get them out of the forest and say, you need to have a more civilized life. We want to build villages for you. We want to build hospitals for you. And they built these hospitals. They had very nice buildings, but no one from these communities wanted to go there because they are used to living into their villages, into their forests, and that's their way of life. So it is wrong to assume that there's a better way of life in just building, these houses. By the way, with metal sheets that are very, very hot and noisy when it rains, and no one maintains after a while. So they decided to keep their way of life, and that's fine. Now this brings me to the issue, the whole issue about small scale, large scale farming. And again, I think it will be, it will not be necessary to oppose small scale farming with large scale. We need both. But we need to rationalize it, and we cannot have a sort of straitjacket that would be applied like the Green Revolution worked in Asia. It does not necessarily work the same way in Africa. And there are initiatives for green revolutions in Africa, Green Revolution in Africa, that are actually trying to learn from Africa how to adapt the great success that was observed in Asia with some serious consequences on the environment, but actually in terms of production it was a great success. But it cannot be replicated without any adaptation to the situation in Africa. So one has to apply, one has to make a decision, an informed decision. This is where we are having serious problems with land acquisitions in Africa, which are basically promoting the large-scale agriculture practices. By the way, not for the local people in the countries, but for export to the countries that are coming with the investments, which poses another more problem. But what the problem we have there is that most of these people are coming for large-scale agriculture and actually taking land away from local stakeholders and taking production away, competing with the local production and transforming farmers into workers. And I think we have to look at it from that perspective. And why is governments in this country, why are governments in these countries accepting these kind of deals? Bad governance, again, corruption, essentially, lack of vision. And studies that have been done from around the world have demonstrated that the land acquisition cost, the price that is paid by those that are coming for land acquisition in Africa, they paid 100 times less than the real cost of the hectare and the equivalent of the investment they would have made in another region of the world. 100 times less. So no doubt why they are focusing in some parts of the world which they feel are underpopulated, although that is not true. At least they have the space for more land acquisition. And also because of corruption and bad governance, they can have land for almost free, less than $1 per hectare. So I think these issues are a little bit more complex, but it is very important to recognize that biodiversity produces food. Biodiversity produces food, a different type of food than the crops we are talking about in terms of modern agriculture, but a food that is equally important in many parts of the world, again, including in Africa, in rural Africa. Up to 40% of the proteins are provided by biodiversity. And it doesn't harm the environment because it is done in a way that is not yet destructive. So I think these should all be taken into consideration, and we should adapt our decisions to local situations. Thank you.
Very good, thanks. Yeah, definitely a theme coming out of these conversations is there really is no one size fits all. So to the extent of the framing of these questions in particular, don't go in with any foregone conclusions or assumptions in terms of fixing systems that may not need to be fixed. We'll go back here and then Dominic.
Hello, I'm Matthew Fielding from the Stockholm Environment Institute. Just one point about the overview. I think we're getting confused between food security and food self-sufficiency. Excuse me. Because I think they're two different things. I think whilst 70% of the world's poor are farmers and producers, 100% are consumers. And I think you need to think not just about local or national food production, you need to think about trade, you need to think about global terms of trade. You also need to think about purchasing power parity. So you need to think of, with your example about producing avocados for Tesco, they're producing avocados, but does that give them food security? No, that gives them money. What's that money worth when global food prices rise? And so if they're not able to buy food, then that is food insecure still. So maybe the goals of that aren't really addressing food security, but they should really think about food self-sufficiency. So that's one of my points. The other thing about looking, even when we look at small or large scale farming in sub-Saharan African countries, in like Mali, that we've heard from here, it's very well and good to think about, changing agricultural systems and monitoring inputs and fertilizers and things like that. But when extreme droughts come, or when large-scale soil erosion happens, what you're in trying to keep smallholders farming, you're in fact keeping them in a vulnerable position by trying to eke out more small-scale productivity in vulnerable areas. Actually, keeps these people in a vulnerable position. So, like Ibrahim, the rational choice is to leave agriculture and go to the towns, because there you have a more secure livelihoods there. So that's the first point on that. Secondly, regarding wastewater and also reuse, we've had projects, one project in Niger that's looking at the reuse of urine as a food, as a nutrient onto food in farming, and it contains, in 500 litres of urine, you've got between 2 to 2.3 and 4 kilograms of nitrogen,